In Conversation with Terry Shepard, award-winning broadcaster, narrator, and author. A deep dive into the writer's craft with the artists and support systems who create the stories we love.
Thanks, Lisa. Today, we're exploring a question that has divided thinkers for centuries and may just hold the key to reconnecting two of humanity's greatest pursuits, science and faith. Guest is Brian Cranley, a biomedical engineer turned theologian whose new book, The Call of Wonder, invites readers to rediscover awe at the intersection of empirical discovery and spiritual faith. From the Big Bang to the human brain, from ancient wisdom to quantum theory, Brian reveals how the mysteries of science may not oppose belief, but illuminate it. Brian Cranley, welcome to the conversation.
Thank you, Terry. I'm honored to be here. Appreciate that intro.
What motivated you to write the book?
I heard a podcast once with, it was either Ryan Holiday or Tim Ferriss, and they said, you should not write a book unless the pain of keeping the idea in is worse than the pain it takes to write a book. And I was like, yeah, it's gotten to that point. So I've been thinking about this for probably 20 years, and I had an aha moment, which we can talk about, but that aha moment stuck with me. I looked all over the internet to see if someone else had said it in that particular way. And since they hadn't, the pain of keeping that idea in was great. So I decided to become a writer.
And what was that aha moment?
Good question. So I have a background randomly in biomedical engineering because I was considering becoming a physician. But instead, I went to the seminary and studied philosophy and theology for 5 years. And so when I came back out of the seminary, I decided not to go into ministry. I worked now in medical sales. And one day I was watching a YouTube video on the origins of the universe and what happened in the first moment of time at the Big Bang. And I think it was put out by Fermilab in Chicago. Anyway, they were describing the first moment of the Big Bang as this perfect unity where the four forces of physics were all one and the same thing. And mass and energy, because of the intense conditions, were one and the same thing. And the unity they described brought back my philosophy studies. And I said, wow, that sounds exactly like how Thomas Aquinas and Aristotle describe the divine simplicity, it's called, where God is one and the same thing, a perfect unity. And so that idea that the first moment of time reflected the image of God's unity just kind of sat there and percolated and started a book.
That seems so far from what you're doing today.
I know, I'm a weird one.
The tension between science and faith is centuries old. Why do you think this divide has persisted for so long?
I think it's persisted for a long time. Stephen Hawking says religion is based on authority, what your denomination teaches, and science is based on this sort of evidence that we find when we authentically just search for what's right in front of our eyes. And I think the modes of thinking are different. And what brought them together for me in particular was hearing Thomas Aquinas and Aristotle and Plato and Augustine and the Jewish and Islamic philosophers also talk about God in logical terms, which is something that's lost in today's modern age. But they used to talk about God really scrupulously and logically. And when they talk about him like that, it sounded very much like the scientific method. And I think there's some pretty cool bridges you can make when you look at I call it the religious philosophy. It's not so much theology as it is natural philosophy and religious philosophy. When you look at it through that lens, which my book tries to do, that's where you can see some bridges begin to form that, a lot of modern people might not know them, but that's why I tried to write the first half of my book, to have that whole history of the philosophy of God so that people can learn that logical image that I think you can see in science. And it's pretty cool.
You write that science and faith may be revealing the very same truths. Can you unpack what that means for someone who feels they must choose between one or the other?
Sure, I can try. That's a big one. I think the whole point of the book is that I believe God wrote his image into science. And so believers don't need to be afraid that if I look into the science too much, it's going to destroy my faith. something like that. I spent a lot of time listening to the atheist arguments, the atheist scientific arguments, and they have some good arguments that we believers need to, I guess, acknowledge and accept. But my view of the science is God wrote the same divine attributes into the world, into the human mind, and into the evolution of life that the philosophers and theologians talk about. So once you have that foundation down and you realize that they're revealing the same picture, then, personally, I'm Christian. Christianity fits perfectly on top of that foundation. You can make an argument for Judaism or Islam sitting upon that foundation because they all have philosophers that use this same sort of rational arguments for God.
Brian Cranley is our guest. We're talking about his new book, The Call of Wonder. His website is briancranley.com. You and I share something in common in that we trained for a number of years for one career and then decided to do something totally different. What made you do that?
To my current career now, medical sales. I was training to be a doctor, and then I went into the seminary. And when I came out, I had a degree in biomedical engineering. And so I decided to go back to the medical device world and realized I hated engineering and I liked people. And I gravitated in the medical device world towards the sales side and taking care of patients and working directly with people and physicians. And I absolutely love it. It's such a cool field where a lot of, even your competitors are impressive, a lot of impressive people. It keeps you on your toes, keeps you challenged. It almost feels like constantly playing sports because you have a sales quota you're trying to reach and they measure you against everybody else. So I ended up in medical sales, but ever since I had that education in philosophy and theology, it just doesn't go away. And so I find myself in between sales I just keep thinking about this stuff that I learned so long ago, and it just stuck with me. So pretty cool. I enjoy my field, but I also like being an author now too.
It is said that we are all ministers to some sort of faith. How did you come to your faith?
I was raised in a pretty devout Catholic home. I went back and forth. I've been on a pendulum of moving towards faith, moving away from faith, checking out Protestant Christianity. And then I just developed, a love for religious studies. So I'll be the guy to watch every cult video on Netflix. I'll be the guy. I want to know, what do you believe is true and why do you believe it? And I took we had some electives in seminary school where I took world religions just because it fascinates me. So I enjoy learning about the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints and Islam and Hinduism, Eastern Orthodoxy, all that stuff. I just find it fascinating what people believe and why. So that's my personal interest, which helped in writing the book. But yeah, it's been quite a journey.
Why is religion such a divisive topic for so many?
Obviously, people hold it as very dear to their heart and probably for many the most important thing. I think there's a little bit of a fear, though. If I say I'm similar to you in this way, that somehow I'm discounting Christianity. If I say, here's where Christianity and Islam are the same, that's scary for people because, maybe they think I'm not being faithful to the message of Jesus or whatever it is, if I show what we have in common. But one thing I loved about the Catholic education that I got was they really went into that history of what we have in common. And if you trace the history of philosophy, and especially the conversation of Plato and Aristotle, you see how that conversation in particular was taken up into all of monotheism, and it's written into all of our creeds. And so this whole idea that God is one, that he's eternal, that he's infinite, those are things that all three of the major monotheistic religions hold in common. And I think it's okay if we say that.
Brian Cranley is our guest. The book is Call of Wonder. I love that title, Brian. How do you define wonder?
Oh, I love that question. When I first when I was starting to write the book, I knew I had to have the word wonder in the title. And so I went through probably 8 different titles, but as anyone finds out who writes a book nowadays, almost every title is already taken. So you have to kind of work with it. But the Call of Wonder, I wanted wonder because I truly believe authentic wonder, which is different than, say, the imagination, using your imagination to think of something, or a CGI movie or social media, that's sensationalist wonder. Authentic wonder, I believe, is the one common experience that philosophers, theologians, and scientists all hold in common. even if you're an atheist scientist, you have to admit that there is something innate within you that is drawing you, just in this wonder to the natural world, deep space, the images from the James Webb Telescope, whatever it is, biology, evolutionary biology. There's some kind of wonder in there that draws us to find out more. And it's almost insatiable. It's almost like you can't get enough. And so I wanted to say the call of wonder because I believe that God is calling us through that wonder. That is part of the intellect of our soul, is this seeking fulfillment in wonder. And I believe that's God behind the scenes trying to show you his face through science, through the natural world, through theology, and through search for truth. So I wanted to put the word wonder in there, and I wanted to put the dynamic that it's not us who is creating wonder. We are the ones responding to it.
You talk about the concepts of humility and mystery in the book. What roles do they play in both the scientific part of discovery and spiritual life?
Yeah, mystery is huge. And I've been thinking about this ever since writing the book more and more. Theologian Frank Sheed says, we need mystery because it tells us that there's this unending well of truth to which we can always go back and find fulfillment. And so the reason why mystery is so important, whether it's in science or in theology, is that for mental health, one, we need to get outside of ourselves. And all of us know this, just focusing on our problems in daily life, day after day, it just gets exhausting. And so mystery is almost an instant cure for that, where if you look into space, watch a nature documentary, read some philosophy, or go to church, there's a well that you can return to whenever you want because God is infinite. And so there is no end. And what I talk about in my book is the desire, just because we can't fully understand God doesn't mean you can't keep figuring out more and more. So you can advance along that path, even though you never get to the end. But that's the fascinating part. I feel like that's what the human person is made for, is to seek that and to find that.
There are always skeptics out there, both in the scientific and religious community, who remain deeply suspicious of integrating science and theology. How do you respond to those people?
Yeah, I've had some great conversations with atheists online and atheist friends. And like I said earlier in the podcast, as believers, we have to acknowledge probably the two most difficult things are the problem of suffering and evil. Why would a good God create so much suffering and evil? Like the floods we had in Texas just this last weekend, absolutely brutal and devastating. And it makes you question goodness. And so there's that. And there's also this idea that science has the answer for everything, right? And so the Big Bang, even though we can't explain, I think that's the hardest one to explain, where it came from, it seems natural. Or abiogenesis, which is the creation of a living cell from non-living matter. It seems like it just happened on its own and it's natural. And the human person evolved from a monkey or a caveman, and all that seems natural. And one thing I go into in my book is God almost never acts apart from the natural world. If you look at any miracle in the Bible, whether it be the burning bush, the parting of the Red Sea, or any miracle of Jesus where he rubs mud on people's eyes, or he uses water for baptism, or he turns bread into his body and wine into his blood, God is always reminding us that creation is good. And he's always reminding us of the chorus of Genesis where he says, this is good. And it's almost like Jesus won't act apart from the natural world. This is something I'm fascinated with now after writing the book. I'm trying to find an example. Even in the Transfiguration, he becomes lit up with this glory, but it's still his human body. There's still a natural aspect to almost every miracle. And so what I claim in my book is that the three miracles of science are the exact same type of quality of miracle. You have a Big Bang, you have life from non-living matter, and you have the human mind from evolution of animals. And all three of those look natural, but they're also unexplainable. We cannot create living cells in our lab. We cannot recreate a universe, and we cannot understand our mind, even though every one of us is so dear to our own mind. They all have this sense of mystery at the same time as being natural. And I kind of want to redefine miracles in that sense. It's just fascinating to me.
Brian Cranley is our guest. We're talking about his new book, The Call of Wonder. Brian Cranley, CRANLEY.com is the website. How has your own sense of wonder evolved over time?
After writing the book, and this authentically, It has grown exponentially. Now, when I had the first idea, the aha moment, I was like, that's a cool idea. But then as I wrote the book, it required me to go back to my old philosophy studies, from 15 years ago, 10 years ago. And I had to reread all that stuff and do the research for the book. And the idea developed from the Big Bang to seeing the same pattern in evolution, to seeing the same pattern in how the human mind thinks. And now I see the same pattern, this is after the book, in how Jesus spread the gospel. It starts with him preaching, and then it goes to the 12 disciples, and then it branches out into the infinite places and people and souls throughout the world. It's like the same pattern repeating. And it just gives you chills. It's just crazy. It's almost nonstop. Like you could think about this the rest of your life, and it's pretty exciting.
Very similar to viral social media today.
Yeah, true.
How can people begin to cultivate more wonder in their own lives?
One thing is get back out in nature and maybe scroll a little bit less on social media. Obviously, we all know that, but it's hard to actually do. I think the easiest way to cultivate wonder is the 15-minute daily walk. It's so easy to implement, and atheists and believers alike talk about the power of a walk, whether it's to generate new ideas, to feel refreshed, just to get back outside where we were created to be. I think that's the easiest way to cultivate wonder in your life. But also, one thing I loved, again, from Tim Ferriss, if you're planning a vacation, I think it's important to plan in some natural wonders, plan in maybe a natural history science museum, something that connects you back with creation and with the earth. I think that's a powerful and easy way to kind of reconnect to your wonder and just let it automatically do its thing on you.
What's been the hardest thing for you about writing the book?
Writing. Yeah, I just wish people knew how much I hated writing in college. Like in engineering, obviously there's no papers. It's all math problems. But then when you get to philosophy and theology, it's all papers. And I remember thinking any assignment over 2 pages was just torture. And you'll see it in the way I write. I compact. I have a hard time being really extravagant in my writing. It's very compact. It's very get to the point really quickly. And so it's a lot of information in this book, but writing is just a hard process. And so I'm glad to be done with it, at least for now.
There is a growing movement of Christians who want to engage with science more openly. What do you think faith communities can do to encourage that dialogue?
100%. I just read the most phenomenal book on exactly this topic. It's called Evolution, Creation, and Intelligent Design, and it's put out by Zondervan. And what it does is it takes the 4 popular creation versus evolution, or creation and evolution mixes in, it's specifically Christian, in Christianity today, and it has the lead voice for that belief write what they believe, and then each of the other 3 can critique it, and then the original author gets to do a rejoinder. And so you can see all 4 beliefs, and just real quickly, they're young earth creation, which is the belief that Genesis is literally true and it took 7 exact days. There's old earth creation, which is the belief that God created with special creation, meaning he made plants, he made animals, he made humans, all separate, but he did it over billions of years instead of 7 days. Then there's theistic evolution, which is biologos, which is what my book adheres to, which is God used evolution as his creative materials. And then there's another belief system out there called intelligent design, which is not a theory of how God created, but rather looking in science for proof of a designing mind in like the cells and in the fine tuning of the universe. Fascinating book. I definitely recommend it. Creation, Evolution, and Intelligent Design by Zondervan.
We're living in a very uncertain time right now that feels like a historic shift, not just in our country, but in our world. How does Call of Wonder fit into a prescription for survival?
I'll tell you how it does for me. Whenever I get caught up in politics or I get caught up in work or stress, I honestly return to these topics, and it immediately humbles you and puts you, it restores your perspective of your particular humble place in the larger universe. And it reminds you, hey, evolution, dinosaurs, ice ages have been happening for billions, millions of years. And here we are arguing about this one little thing. I don't know. I think a return to wonder helps you put in perspective problems of your daily life and the larger world, and maybe find some common ground with people you disagree with in religion or politics.
The book is The Call of Wonder, written by our special guest, Brian Cranley. His website, if you want to learn more about the book and about him, is briancranley.com. A fascinating conversation, my friend. Thanks so much.
Yeah, Terry, thank you so much for having me. I really enjoyed it.
In Conversation with Terry Shepard is a copyrighted presentation. All rights reserved. I'm Lisa Davis. Join Terry Shepard next time in Conversation.